Good afternoon. My name is Doug Lean. I'm the Economic Development Manager for the Office of Economic Development, City of Auburn. I want to welcome you to our first of our 2016 Business Workshop series. Our speakers today will be talking about how to start a business. Speakers will present a summary of current trends, financial considerations, legal aspects, business marketing, and research. We believe that this will be a foundation for the beginning of a new idea or the advancement or the betterment of an existing business. We have four amazing speakers with us today, and we hope that they will be here to answer some of your questions and at least get you going down the right track. And as always, they're always available at a later date for your one-on-one participation with them. First, Tim Broxholm. He's a professor and business consultant professor at Green River College, and he's going to speak to us on the current market today.
Thank you for having me back again for a second year. So I appreciate the City of Auburn and Doug for having me, giving me the opportunity to come and speak with you. So I look forward to sharing with you some information about the marketplace and as you're starting to think about or launch your business idea, some things that I would be looking at. In addition to teaching at Green River, I'm also the program director for the Bachelor's of Applied Science in Marketing and Entrepreneurship, where we focus on applied learning through project-based learning. So our students are actually doing projects with real businesses in our community. So we get to work with a lot of entrepreneurs from the Kent, Auburn, Sumner area. So if there's things that we can help you with there, please let us know, and I'm sure my students would love to help you. First thing I'd like to talk about today is the business environment. And really there's three areas that I'd encourage you to focus on as you assess your own business opportunities. At the 50,000 foot level is the idea of the macro environment. Now, this is an environment where you may not have a lot of opportunity to influence, but you should be highly aware of what's going on and the impact it could play in your business, whether on a positive side is in terms of an opportunity, or it could impact or hinder your business, and what are you going to do about that? And as we look at those in the macro section, we take a look at the political environment. So obviously we know this year is an election year, and that has an impact. We know that there are geopolitical things going on around the world that have an impact on economies as well as the markets. And then we also know that that here in the local area, that economics of our communities play an impact too. And then as we look at the economy as a whole, we do see some things that are going on globally and having an impact, as many of you may have seen, that the first couple weeks of the markets here have been in turmoil. And we want to just be, we don't want to freak out about that, but we don't necessarily want to ignore it either. So we look at to see, does this have an impact on my business? How could this have an impact on my business? Again, whether that's positive or negatively. Then what we start to look at is the social trends. What's happening in our society? What's happening in our local communities? And how are those changes in whether it's beliefs, attitudes, values, whatever it may be, how can we utilize that information and that data to be ahead in terms of trends? Or again, how can we utilize that in our business or create a business idea around some of those things? Technology is consistently changing and having an impact on our ability to conduct commerce. And so from that standpoint, we want to look at the ability to leverage that technology to make business opportunities more worthwhile for us. If that's increasing our operational effectiveness, if that's using a technology play to enhance our business or building a business around technology, all of those opportunities are around us. And so analyzing that area of the macro environment. And lastly is the environmental and legal elements that come into play too, as we see what's going on in those sectors and how they may impact our businesses. Then I think more importantly for entrepreneurs and small business owners is the microenvironment. And really taking a look at how is your business either being run or how would you like to run your business and who are those core stakeholders. Once we understand who those core stakeholders are, then we can make some decisions around how are we going to do business. And that sets the stage for the foundation of your culture. It builds the foundation of your strategy. And so you want to make sure that you really understand who those stakeholders are. Now, one mistake that I see entrepreneurs often make is they may list 2 or 3 different stakeholders, But at the end of the day, you've got to know who number one is. Is it your investors? Is it your employees? Is it your customers? Who are you truly going to make those decisions when it comes to push and shove around? Competitors. Competition is still tough, and I think that the barriers of entry to be able to compete in different businesses are becoming less and less, especially when it comes to the small business area. I see one company out here who's interested in the brewing industry, and that's a very competitive industry with a couple of large players, but many small players in that space. And so analyzing your competitors and what can you do to differentiate yourself, and what makes you alike and what makes you different. As you look at your suppliers, then you're looking at some of your operational costs. If you are a supplier, is how can you ensure that you continue to not only meet but exceed your customers' needs. Intermediaries of where your product is utilized and the markups and the things that go along with that in terms of a pricing component, and ultimately consumers. Listening to your customers, figuring out what their needs and wants are, and how your product is or isn't meeting those, and making adjustments rapidly to it. The last one is the internal section, and this is based off of Marcus Lemonis, who has a television show called The Profit on CNBC. It's one that I recommend young entrepreneurs or people that have ideas or want to see kind of what running a small business is like. We use this in our classroom as a way to engage our students. He talks about the 3 Ps, people, product, and process. And I think as you're starting to build your business, you have to think about that. You have to think about who are the right people that I want to engage with in terms of developing my team and my staff. The product, continue looking at what do I need to do to make sure that we have a product that meets people's needs and exceeds people's needs, and our processes. Michael Gerber talks about this in the E-Myth Revisited about how entrepreneurs have this moment of an entrepreneurial seizure, that moment where you're saying, oh, I could go out and do this, or I've got this great idea for a business. But then what ends up happening is as you get going, you realize that you don't necessarily have the infrastructure, the process, and the systems in play. And so that process and system component is a huge part of success. Now, as we go forward, I want to talk about 3 areas of building your business model. The first one is value creation, the second is your profit, and the third is the logic of the business. Now, as we look at the value creation model, there's some core questions that I would encourage each of you to ask your businesses. One is, who are your customers, and what is your product or service offering? 2 is, how does the offering create differentiated value for them? 3, what is the value chain? What part are you in? And what is your go-to-market strategy? I wanted to give you a few different opportunities on creating value. So as you look at your business, there are some things that you can choose as the business owner and as a strategy to compete on. One is operational excellence. So if you look at your business and you can outcompete other businesses by having really effective and efficient processes and operations, then you can control costs and better compete. One is product leadership, creating the best product possible, outcompeting them on quality. Another is customer intimacy, having that relationship with your customer and exceeding and beating your competition purely on the ability to have better customer service and a better service strategy and or a service culture, and developing that throughout your organization. One is finding a marketplace or creating a marketplace. So as an example, I've seen recently organizations like Airbnb, who have essentially created a platform to connect people who are willing to rent out their homes and people who are willing to rent homes. And it's really changing the hospitality industry. All that is creating a marketplace of buyers and sellers. So does your product or your service or your company have the ability to create a platform or a technology or a marketplace to which people can go in and do commerce? And there's value that gets created from that. The value chain being looked at in terms of where are you at in the process of adding value to other organizations. So we have a manufacturer out here in the audience today. And so obviously the product that you're creating adds a lot of value to other organizations. And so being able to communicate that and articulate that and find who are the core customers is a key to advancing your business. The last one is the go-to-market strategy. So after you figure out all this stuff, you got to figure out how to go make money. And that's your marketing piece. How are you going to differentiate your brand? How are you going to develop a brand? What is going to be your special sauce in that process? So it's going to be key for you to not only have all of these things kind of at least an idea to go forward with, but then you have to make it come to life, and that's your go-to-market strategy. Beyond that, you can have the greatest business idea in the world, and you can have great customer service, and you can have operational excellence, but you have to be able to create a profit. And that's not a dirty word. That's not a bad thing. That profit allows you to make an impact in your community. It allows you to make an impact with your employees. It allows you the opportunity to make a worthwhile life for you and your family. So profit is not a dirty word, but it is an essential component to staying in business. And so the first thing you need to look at are what are your revenue sources? So are people willing to pay, and how are you having that transaction? Is it a transactional piece of buying and selling? Is it a subscription model where people are coming in and they're paying a fee on a regular basis? Is it a metered rate where, per amount of service you get charged? You have to think about what is it, not only your driving revenue sources, but how do you want to generate those fees? And so that's a key component of it. Then you have to look at once you look at your revenue, you have to look at your expenses, your cost structure. So you may have a great revenue source. You may be bringing in lots of money, but if you can't keep your costs under control or your costs exceed your revenue, you're not going to be in business very long. It's just not sustainable. So those two factors have to be in the same realm, and you have to then know what's driving that profitability. And that can be also where you look at your value creation. So if it's that we have to sell X amount of product and we have to make it up on volume, well, then maybe it's on the operational side where we have to make sure we really cost control. Or on the other side, it could be that we have a really niche product that we can have a premium with, and we want to spend the extra time to make sure it's the best of the best. And so you really need to understand your revenue, your cost structure, as well as what's driving that profitability, and hone in on those elements. Lastly, I would say that we look at the logic of your business. And this is where you as a business owner have to start to be not only looking at your business from this is my source of income. It has to be something bigger. It has to be something more strategic on, okay, where are we going next? And so having that understanding of meeting your profit goals and your growth targets and really honing on that. Now, one resource that I like to recommend to entrepreneurs is Vern Harnish's books on the Rockefeller habits or scaling growth. Those are two good processes that are set up. I also still recommend the E-Myth Revisited and Lean Startup. Those are all books that we utilize in our program, and I think those are great resources for entrepreneurs as well. Great. Any questions? Yes. Sure. I'll let them let Tiffany come with the mic.
Oh, what were the names of the books?
Yeah, here are a couple of names. Vern Harnish is one of the authors. In Seattle, they actually have an entrepreneurs organization that is kind of rooted in Vern's work. And so the Rockefeller Habits is a good one, as well as scaling growth is what it is. And then Michael Gerber's The E-Myth Revisited, as well as I think it's Eric Rees and the Lean Startup. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tim. At this time, we're going to hear from Kirk Davis, who's the Senior Business Advisor for the SBDC, Small Business Development Authority, with Green River College, and one of our partners working with and also makes available counseling services for small minority micro startups for us here in Auburn. Kirk?
Doug, thank you very much. I always like to thank Doug Lean and his great work here for the economic development of Auburn, and thank the City of Auburn for hosting this. And it's wonderful to have you here. By way of background, my name is Kirk Davis, and I've been at Green River College for 11 years helping businesses one-on-one I do get the opportunity to teach quite a few classes, but I work one-on-one with usually 100 to 150 businesses a year. And I get a chance to see a lot of startups and work with businesses with growth issues as well. And I was in banking prior to that. I was a business banker with Bank of America and U.S. Bank. So I've been around this whole startup issue a lot. Getting funding is one of the hardest parts of actually getting a good business started, having adequate funding, getting that funding. And it's not easy. It's really the position that you're in and what you're trying to do is not easy. So let's see if I can go to the next slide smoothly. A little bit about me. I really enjoy working with businesses. I get very excited about what you're doing. To move from the world of being an employee to becoming an entrepreneur is very challenging. We've been trained through our schooling and through what we've seen in our life experience of working for a company. That's something we know, something we're familiar with, getting a job, writing a resume, going for interviews, dealing with all the things we deal with as employees. And then you're going to make that leap, an actual jump right into entrepreneurship, and everything changes. And people are surprised. I've actually worked with people who were managers of businesses who purchased the company they were managing, and they said they couldn't believe the difference between managing a company and actually owning the company. So I congratulate you on your decision to start a company. I think it's very exciting, very challenging, and again, it puts you into this whole new world of entrepreneurship, which is full of decisions, problem solving. Tim and I were just talking about some of those things at the beginning. So I want to share with you kind of where I'm going to talk to you about how to write a business plan. The easiest way that I've ever found to write a business plan, and we write business plans because it's the first step in helping us get the funding. So it's kind of one of those hurdles we have to jump over to get where we want to go. And I have this step-by-step map to help you understand where this whole thing fits into. Of course, entrepreneurship always starts with an idea, and it's one of those ideas that will never leave you alone. You'll have this idea, and it'll wake you up in the middle of the night. It'll keep you up at night. It'll wake you up early in the morning. You'll be thinking, planning. And the second step you see on the map is research. We're going to get a chance to hear from Stephen Bailey, who's fantastic on research. I highly recommend King County Library System and their resources, and you're going to learn incredible things. And Tim gave us some really good outlines and questions to ask when you're in this research or homework phase of your business. So you need to ask yourself those questions that Tim had on there, whether that was macro or micro or local. There's a bunch of things you need to tune into as an entrepreneur to ensure that you're successful. This research is the hardest part of writing the business plan. And when we look at business failures, probably one of the biggest reasons businesses fail, and I know you can say, well, maybe they didn't quite get their marketing right, maybe they didn't have enough funding, maybe they weren't prepared in terms of something that Tim talked about, operational excellence. They didn't provide that quality or product leadership. However, usually all of that stems back from not actually doing your homework in the beginning. So if I could influence you to stop and think through those questions that Tim gave us and apply that to your own research and homework, how are we going to deliver excellence? How are we going to deliver quality? How are we going to be a product leader? How are we going to build that customer relationship? Some of those were such great questions. And again, you're going to hear about some incredible resources to help you do that. This is really a fantastic forum here. So now we're going to take all of that research and put it into a business plan. And that's what my presentation is about, is the fastest, easiest way to do that. And the process I'm going to show you is called pitch to plan. But I wanted to show you what happens after the business plan. Now, of course, one of the reasons we write the business plan, so we have a good idea of how to win, how to succeed in business. So we want to write a business plan for that purpose. But also it becomes kind of almost a calling card, if you will, to banks or to investors or to partners, and sometimes even to employees or landlords. Business plans are used a lot of times to actually give you credibility. So a lot of times when you're going to present an idea, and even if your family is going to fund this, the research is showing that 60% of startups are self-funded. So the majority of startups, people have saved up money and they've been preparing, they've been planning, doing financial projections, and they fund it themselves. But the next category after that is a category of funding we call friends, families, and fools. And so I know that doesn't sound nice, but these are the believers. But even the believers are people who need a business plan to help give them confidence. They want to know, how does this work? How are you going to jump into the marketplace and provide value? But how are you going to deal with all the competitive issues and maybe the political issues, economic issues? How are you going to deal with those problems? So the business plan is the answer to those questions. Now, before we actually get the funding, which is number 5 on the map, we want to do something very, very important, and that's protect you legally and protect the business and protect the ideas that you've got. So we have a wonderful presenter today who's going to share those ideas. So we're richly blessed today to have great presenters on great topics. They're going to help us go more in depth. So once you've got your business plan, once you've got yourself legally protected, and again, that's protecting you financially, probably in the form of some form of corporation, then your intellectual property, which could be trademarks, copyrights, patents. We want to get the business legally set up and protected, and that's a form of also of credibility. Did you actually set up a formal business structure? But once we've got you protected, we've got your business plan in place, then we can go for the funding. And in that whole process of research and writing the business plan, you've been creating this very wicked startup list. The startup checklist, something you have to do as you're doing your research, is one of the hardest phases of business I've ever seen. It always takes longer than you think it's going to take. There's always more problems than you think there's going to be. It always costs more than you estimate it's going to cost. I've helped several entrepreneurs get started this year, and every single one of them have had challenges when it comes down to the startup checklist. So again, the more thorough you can be, the more detailed you can be on your startup checklist. But that's the painful part. Stage 6 is getting that startup. But once you've got your website, you've got your business card, you've got your process, equipment, tools, you've got all those things that you need to get started, we launch the business, and then we're into stage or phase number 7, which is the first mile. That came from a Harvard professor about once you get started in your business, that first mile is break-even stage. So now we've got to focus you on, we've got launch, but now we've got to get the sales up to a certain point where your business at least breaks even. Now, of course, we want to do better than that. But in that first mile stage, before you hit break even, there's something investors call a burn rate. And it's the rate at which you're burning cash. And we've seen all kinds of stories there, but my goal is to get businesses into a break even as quickly as possible, 3 to 6 months, hopefully no longer than that. But because you were doing research, you were doing homework, you were doing financial projections, you knew that, and you were prepared with adequate funding to get you through that first mile stage. Once you get past the break even stage, then we get into a place where you're building cash instead of burning cash. And this has been maybe the most exciting thing for me working with entrepreneurs, is to get people who I work with who are flat broke, have no credit, they just have an idea. I've had so many businesses come to me with just, I have an idea, but they have nothing. I'll just tell you a quick story. I had a wonderful lady approach me, no credit, no money, but she wanted to build an indoor soccer stadium in Tacoma. And she said, I have nothing, but can I do it? I said, well, it's going to be hard. But 2.5 years later, we broke ground on her new facility, about a $3.4 million facility in Tacoma that's there today. She's doing very well, very successful. So I tell people that great ideas do get funded. You know, if you got a great idea, stick with it. It takes tenacity. She had to fight for the funding. She had to fight for investors. She had to fight the city on permitting issues, the city of Tacoma. It was, every step of it was difficult, but today she's living her dream. That dream that she had when she started, and I know you'll be living your dream as well. So we want to take the money, the cash that's building up in your account, and use that for growth. We reinvest that back into the business for equipment or new locations or more people, whatever that takes. And now you have an opportunity for expansion. And that's where things get really exciting. But it doesn't happen until you have a business plan. So let's see if I can get you to this easiest way to write a business plan. So these 10 topics are the basic outline of any business plan. This is very standard. Have any of you, just out of curiosity, tried to go online and research how to write a business plan? Have any of you tried that? So many people come to me and they'll go, boy, I went online, I looked for a business plan outline, I looked for some tools, They even tried several things. It gets very confusing, it gets very overwhelming, it gets very, very complex. So these 10 topics will help simplify what an investor or a banker or somebody funding your business really needs to know. So let's just go through those real quick. First of all, they do want to know about you. They want to know, how is your business structured? How is it protected? Are you a corporation? Are you a sole proprietor? They want to know those questions. What credibility do you bring as an owner? So a lot of times in banking, we wouldn't fund a business unless the owner had at least 5 years of experience in that field. So a lot of times if people come to us with an idea, but they had no experience in the field, would turn them down and say, go to work for somebody in that field, get 5 years of experience, or hire somebody with 5 years of experience. So they want to know in the About Us section, they want to know your concept, your business, who are you, how is it legally structured, but also what do you bring to the table in terms of experience and credibility in the field. Then number 2 is explaining the market opportunity. And this has to go with what problem, are you trying to solve? Do we need another type of business like yours? Is there already something out there? Do you have a lot of competition or a little competition? So they want to understand why and how you see an opportunity. And entrepreneurs, we're really unique people because we see opportunities before anybody else does. Imagine Airbnb. Who would have seen that opportunity happening? Or Uber, any of these crazy companies. There's a fantastic story about Chobani yogurt that jumped into maybe one of the most highly competitive. There was no other space on the shelf for another yogurt company, but within 5 years, they took over 50% of the Greek yogurt market and 20% of the entire yogurt market. And again, it was an entrepreneur just like you who saw an opportunity that nobody else could have seen. So crazy how wonderful it is to be an entrepreneur. Not easy, but wonderful. Now, number 3 is your solution. Of course, number 2 is the market opportunity. What do you see happening? What is that opportunity in the market? But number 3 is how are you the solution to that problem? And then number 4 is the market research. What did your research turn up? What can you tell us from credible sources? And that's what you're going to hear a little later on, is how you find credible sources to back up your idea and to back up your research and your proposal. Number 5 is competition. We all know it's out there. And so the 2 big mistakes inexperienced entrepreneurs make is they'll say, everybody's my customer, which isn't true. You need to really narrow that down and say, this specific person is my customer. And then I don't really have any competition. And that's not true either, because in some form or way or another, customers are surviving without you right now. Because, there are people out there who are getting things done without you. And so now what you're going to be doing is changing customer behavior from what they're currently doing to doing what you want, what you're asking them to do. So now we need to talk about the competition, and this is what gives investors real confidence that you have prepared yourself in how you address the competition part of this. The marketing plan, of course, is how are we going to get the word out there? How are we going to tell people what we're doing? But what they want to see there is when you end up talking about your revenue goals, what you anticipate making in sales, does the marketing plan actually back that up? Or do you have just kind of a head nod towards, well, we'll do a website, we'll do business cards, we'll do a little social media. That may not be adequate. They want to know exactly what are we doing and what are we spending on marketing to ensure that we're going to be successful. Again, it's a real confidence builder. Then number 7 is the team. Now, this is the money slide. This is what this is information, and is an investor will make most of their decision based on what they see happening here. Because the question is, are you surrounded with the people? Do you have the people on your team to help you be successful? So I've seen it time and time again. If they don't have confidence in you and your team, and a lot of times another mistake that entrepreneurs make is they'll say, well, when I get some money, I'll build the team. Nobody will go for that. No investors will think that's a good idea. So your job is networking. And I tell entrepreneurs, you have to have an unrivaled network of influencers within your industry. I had a client recently, their company is valued, their pre-launch valuation for their company is $100 million. And this is by industry experts. It's an amazing idea. And they're looking for a $2 million a round of funding, and then $10 million after that for the launch of it. So it's very huge. But they went out because they didn't have a good network developed inside of their industry. And I said, you're going to go nowhere without that network. And I said, you have to be able to give us names on this team. And they didn't have the names. So it took them a couple of months, but they went out and actually met people within the industry. They developed a very strong team, and they had their resumes. They had people who agreed that if there was funding, they would leave their jobs and come onto this company. And they're currently right now being courted by one of the largest companies in the industry for a $12 million investment. And it's been really amazing, been very, very tough. None of this is easy, of course, but that's why we're entrepreneurs. We do hard stuff, right, for all day long. So the team is really critical, that you are surrounded by good people, that you know who you're going to hire, that you've got their resumes. So when you're presenting your business plan, a very big part of this is that team slide and the resumes that go with that. And number 8 is the financial projections. So I'm going to give you a grand secret to doing your business plan more easily. I was working, a coworker of mine happened to be one of the original founders of Starbucks. And I asked him to come in and speak to a class that I was teaching on how to start a business and business plans. And he made this comment, it was very interesting. He said, always start your business planning with your financial projections first. The problem with most business plan outlines like this one is that it's number 8 on the chart. And so people always do all the other stuff first, and then they do number 8. They almost last, they do the financial projections. He said, however, the financial projections become a mini business plan all by itself. And so when you're thinking through the financial assumptions, and this is how many customers we need, this is what we're going to sell them, these are our prices, this is our cost, and you're going through, this is how much money we need for startup. You're thinking through all of those details. You financially outlined your entire business plan. So one of the keys to making a business plan easier is to always start with the financial projections. So think through there's 2 things you have to think through. The startup costs, I should say 3. Startup costs, what's it going to cost you, those one-time expenses to get going? And then what are the monthly expenses? So what is the overhead? And then you're going to think through how many sales do I need to make, minus the cost of goods sold. So, if you're selling bicycles, you're going to think through how many bicycles do I need to sell minus the cost of those bicycles, and that gives you your gross profit number. And that gross profit number is what's used to pay those monthly expenses. So you're thinking through your financial projections first, which gives you a great outline for the rest of the business. And then this also helps you validate your business model. So a big problem that people run into is they write their business plan, then they do their financial projections and go, whoa, I'm not going to make any money. So they go back and change their business plan, and they change their financial projections. They change their business plan, and they keep tweaking back and forth, where if you do the financial projections first and get them right first, then writing the business plan happens. You just do it one time, no tweaks needed, and you'll be much more successful. Then they want to know the current status, where are you at today in the process? So some of you are like early stage, you're very early stage, or some of you might be further along. You may already have a brand developed, you may already have a website, you may have already been in business for, informally, maybe in a small or part-time basis for a couple of years. They want to know what the current status is. And then the last question is the use of funds. Okay, so you've asked for a certain amount of money, but what are you going to do with that? What are those funds going to actually do to help launch the business? So throughout this whole presentation, you've made a lot of sense to a potential investor. So I'm going to give you the pitch then plan approach. So what a lot of people do is they'll go through and write a business plan first, and I don't recommend that. And then the very last thing you're asked to do, the very last thing, is an executive summary. So when you write because you have to write the business plan before you can write the executive summary. But what the experts are recommending now, and I've done this so successfully with all my businesses, is we actually write our executive summary first after we've done the financial projections. So number 1, do the financial projections. Number 2, do the executive summary. It's amazing. It's all of those topics, but just in a very summary form. And how we're actually creating our business plans today is on PowerPoint or a similar presentation software. We're using a picture to tell the words, and then we use 3 or 4 bullet points. It's just that broad, that general, that summarized. And with a very broad summary, then we go back. So we've done the financial projections, we did the executive summary in the form of a presentation or PowerPoint type software, and we just done 3 or 4 bullet points on each topic, and then we go through and write the business plan after that. But I'll tell you what, it is so clear and simple. So there are about 31 of us in the SBDC. We're part of a statewide, nationwide network, and there are over 1,000 SBDC offices throughout the United States. We all do no-cost business advising, and you can engage our office here at Green River College at no cost. We're happy to help you get your business going. And I was with some of my peers at a conference, and we were just talking about how long is it taking people to write a business plan, and almost everybody said too long. But we know people who've been taking 2 years on a business plan. We know people have taken usually 4 to 6 months is like the fastest we've ever seen them written. And we were all asking, we're going around the circle, and they asked me how long it's taking my clients, and I said 1 to 2 weeks. And they thought I was joking. So they went around, they went around the circle. But later, one of my peers asked me, said, "You said 1 or 2 weeks. Is that even possible?" So I explained my process of doing the financial projections first, then doing executive summary, and then writing the business plan. And he's been using it ever since. And he said, "This is so much easier. It's working so much faster." But very few people know the secret. So I'm happy to share it with you today. I want to thank you for your time. Do you have any questions before we go? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Oh, wait for the mic.
So on the financial projections, you said number 1 was the one-time costs. Number 2 would be the monthly fees. And I feel like there was number 3, but I missed it.
Yeah, number 3 was the sales required to cover the monthly costs. Okay. So you want to consider the sales after the cost of the material. So if you're selling bicycles, how many bicycles have to sell minus the cost of them to come up with a gross profit number? Or that's called cost of goods sold. But those are the 3 things, is your startup costs, your monthly costs, and the sales required to cover the monthly costs. Great. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Kirk, thank you very much. That was great. At this time, we're going to have Clinton Wilcock. Clinton is a local attorney here in Auburn, and will speak to you about the subject matter of corporate structures. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. My introduction is that I have been a business attorney here in the city of Auburn for 10 years now, and this last year I decided to go out and do it on my own rather than under somebody else's shingle, so I'm also in that new business category. Typically when I talk to people who are starting a new business, we are usually talking about 5 choices, and I say usually because there are always the exceptions, and I'll touch on a few of those right at the end of my presentation. But generally what you're looking at are a sole proprietor, a partnership, an S corporation, a C corporation, or a limited liability company. Now, with sole proprietorship, this is, if you're the only owner of the business, this is really your default method of doing business. It doesn't require anything of you. If you do nothing, you're a sole proprietorship. The drawback of this simplicity is that you have no liability protection. It's all on you. Everything that you do as a business entity is really going to come back and subject everything you own to any liability claims. This is the main disadvantage to being a sole proprietorship, and where some of these other arrangements will offer some protections from that. I added the comment there that your personal insurance almost certainly will not provide coverage for things that you might have as liability claims for things that you're doing as a sole proprietorship. The second status is also really a default status, and I say that because people don't generally select to be a partnership anymore. It's the default status for people doing business with 2 or more people. It doesn't require any formal written agreement. However, you can have a formal written agreement. A lot of professionals who did business as part of a group used to use this format, but for now, what I see typically, if you're dealing with a partnership, it's either an entity that was started a long time ago, or it's people who set this kind of business up without giving any thought to the liability questions. The only other way that it typically comes up anymore is in a joint venture between some businesses. And in that case, you will definitely have an agreement that outlines everybody's responsibilities and duties. If you don't have a written agreement, then the state does provide basically a set of default rules in Title 25 of the RCWs. That's the Revised Uniform Partnership Act. And as I alluded to before, with this formation, you have no liability protection for your personal assets. So once again, if you mess up, now everything's exposed. The S corporation is the next entity that I typically talk to people about. With corporations, you have two flavors. You have this and the C Corp, and I'll get to the C Corp in a minute. But what this requires is you file Articles of Incorporation with the state, and you also file an S election with the IRS, and that's basically letting them know that you're electing to be taxed as an S corporation rather than a C corporation. This is becoming less common now because it is a very formal structure that you have to use when you're running the company. It requires adoption of bylaws and has a requirement of annual meetings and keeping annual minutes of those meetings. If you were to get sued as a corporation, one of the first things that attorneys typically ask for are copies of your minutes. Because if you're not keeping those, as a matter of course, they can make a claim that basically you've disregarded this corporate form and therefore you shouldn't be accorded any of the liability protection that comes with that. The main feature of an S corporation and where it really differentiates itself from a C corp from a tax point of view is you have pass-through taxation on your earnings. C corporations are usually taxed both when the money comes into the corporation and then when that money is distributed out to shareholders. With this pass-through corporation, basically it all is taxed on your own personal tax return, and you don't get that double taxation. One of the drawbacks of an S corporation, if your business is really, really successful, is you're limited to the amount of shareholders you can have, and they bumped up this level a couple of years ago. It's, I believe, 75 shareholders or less now. It is also governed by state statute. In the same chapter that C corporations would be in RCW 23B, where basically if your agreement doesn't cover it, the statute probably does. The next entity is a C corporation, and you set this up the same way as far as the state is concerned. You file your Articles of Incorporation with the state. It is the default status as far as tax elections with the IRS, so you don't have to require or file any additional documents with the IRS. Also requires adoptions of bylaws and has the requirement of the annual meeting and keeping of the minutes. It can be publicly traded, and that's a big deal because, again, you're not limited in the number of shareholders. The income, as I said, is taxed at the corporate level, and then again when any profits are distributed to the shareholders. So, unless you have a large number of investors who want a piece of equity in the corporation, or you're planning on, you really have a strong belief that your idea is going to be the next big thing and you'd like to go public with it at some point, I really don't talk to people about using a C corporation very much. The Limited Liability Company, or LLC, is really the vehicle that most people want to talk to me about now. Again, you're filing with the state. What you file this time is called a Certificate of Formation, and up until this year, you also had to select whether or not it was going to be a member-managed or a manager-managed company. This distinction isn't really made with the state any longer. They changed that last year. If you want to have the pass-through taxation, you need to file with the IRS and file to be taxed as an S-corp. Technically speaking, an LLC is a type of a partnership, and it's actually governed under the partnership statute in our Washington Revised Code. And this is a relatively new entity in terms of ages, comparative age with some of the other ones that I've talked about here. They've only been established in the state for about 25 years now, and it was about that long when they were actually introduced in this country. I believe Wyoming was the first state to adopt them. Because of this, the assumption is that you have the same type of liability protection that you would get with a corporation. I say it's an assumption because we don't have anywhere near the body of case law showing that's being tested, but this is pretty much the assumption everybody operates under, and I don't see a whole lot of successful challenges to liability protection with LLCs. The owners of an LLC are considered to be members. Now, you can have a single member LLC, which again creates this kind of interesting situation because you're a partnership of one. But that is how the statute is written. The reason why this is considered to be the hot new vehicle and why I think it's a better choice for some business owners is because there are fewer statutory requirements and formalities that are put in place in order to maintain that liability protection. The annual minutes and the keeping of the records of the minutes that you would expect with a C corporation really aren't part of the picture with an LLC. You're not required to do that. Depending on the business that's being conducted as the LLC, I may recommend to clients that they do it anyway, just kind of a way to hedge the bets. But what I've found, especially with people who are new to the business world and are going to be juggling a whole lot of balls in the air all at the same time, it's much simpler to run. And for that reason, that's probably why it's the vehicle of choice for a lot of small businesses. If you are going to have a limited liability company with more than one member, what you are going to have to prepare at some point will be an operating agreement. And when you prepare these, I like to have the CPAs involved in the process because a lot of what is governed in there are how the tax questions are going to shake out, how profits and losses are allocated, basis, and a whole bunch of other issues. And anytime you're going to be seeking any funding, one of the first questions you're going to hear from a potential lender is, can we see the operating agreement? Because they want to know what the plan is and what happens when certain instances occur. One of the other complications that comes up a lot is sometimes these operating agreements are written in a fashion where they tend to leave out what happens if a member dies or if they want to actually leave the company. And leaving the company is probably the bigger question because, again, there are a whole bunch of tax issues that have to be addressed because of the way that the partnership code sections in the tax code work. Overall, though, I don't see limited liability companies really going away anytime soon because it is so simple in comparison to corporations to run, and really you're setting yourself up for a much more successful experience as a business owner and having one. Now, there are some other entities that, depending on what circles you run in and maybe snippets of conversation you hear from time to time, I don't talk to people about these a lot. A limited liability partnership. Really, the only reason that this exists is it was used at one time when, again, professionals were doing business as partnerships. Once the LLCs came in, we got the LLPs as well because this allowed them to convert their formal partnership into an entity that remained a partnership, but at least it provided some degree of liability protection. We could really get into the weeds about how that works, but for a startup, you're probably never going to want to consider it. Limited partnerships have been around a lot longer. These are usually used as an investment entity. You see them a lot with real estate. Actually, it's very popular back east. These require one general partner, which means you're going to have one person who is going to be on the hook in terms of liability. You also see family limited partnerships and family limited liability companies. These are used most often to transfer assets that are expected to appreciate significantly out of mom and dad's estate down to kids or grandchildren. This has a degree of popularity because you can move these assets at discounts, provided that you hire the right CPAs and get all the documentation. The IRS expects to see a stack of paper that looks about like that to describe this and how they arrived at their formulas for the discounting. This also allows the parents to retain significant control over these assets during their lifetime, even if they've transferred the majority of ownership out of their estates. As I said, they require a significant amount of documentation for these discounting if you want the IRS to really leave you alone. So when you decide on the type of entity that you're going to use, the considerations that you're looking at are basically liability protection, the number of owners, the formal requirements for each entity, how much complexity you're willing to put up with, and taxes, which is why I always ask my clients when they come in and say, hey, I want to set up a business, my first question is, what does your CPA say? Because from a liability standpoint, I don't really care either way if it's a corporation or if it's an LLC. We might have some talk about complexity, but really, when it's the CPAs who are going to be filling out the tax returns every year and are going to be setting your expectations for what your taxes are going to look like versus what the business is doing, I want them involved in the conversation. And that finishes it for me. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah. All right, there we go. So what is the benefit? We're currently structured as an LLC, and we're courting investment, and we'll become, instead of member managed, it'll be manager managed, and then we'll, the plan is to file as an LLC, or be structured as an LLC, but file as an S corp.
Okay.
And I've been talking with other brewers about this as we expand our operations. Can you give me a good explanation as why businesses form as an LLC, but then elect to file taxes as an S corp?
It has to do with how the money gets to you and how that money is taxed. Frequently, if people just leave it as an LLC, for IRS purposes, that's a disregarded entity. So you're either going to be taxed as a partnership or a C corporation if you don't make the S election for S corporation. And while the C corporation, now you're looking at double tax issues. If you go the other direction, you may be looking at self-employment tax issues on top of that. And that's what you're trying to avoid when you go through the S election. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Clinton. At this time, we're going to hear from Stephen Bailey with the King County Library System. Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Doug. And thanks to the City of Auburn. I'm always too tall for these things. Thanks to the City of Auburn for hosting this. Hi, everybody. I'm Stephen Bailey. I'm a librarian with the King County Library System, and I'm here to talk about business research. So why do we need to do research? Well, Tim touched on this earlier when he mentioned the business environment, and Kirk touched on it as well when he talked about the research and planning stages of the process. And there's another reason I'll add, which is that if you're going out for funding, if you're looking to go to the bank and have somebody give you money, you have a lot better shot if you know what you're talking about, if you've done your homework first. So how does a library come in? Well, a public library, we're in the information business. We're commonly associated with books, and we still have print books on our shelves. But more and more often, we're being asked to help people navigate the information landscape. A lot of people are familiar with searching the internet for information, and Kurt talked about that earlier when he asked you guys if you've ever looked on the internet for business plan information. I wanted to raise my hand and say, but we have that at the library, you guys. And it's true. We can certainly help you with those types of questions. So let's talk about public libraries for a second, because things are changing these days. There are two major library systems in King County. There's the Seattle Public Library and there's the King County Library System. We are two separate entities. Seattle Public Library operates within the city limits of Seattle, and the King County Library System has the rest of the county outside of the city limits of Seattle. I mention that because it does matter where you live. It does matter what card you have when you walk into a building or when you go online to our website to access our resources. I'll also mention, since we're down in the south part of the county, that there's a world-class library system just south of us in the Pierce County Library System. And they have great resources as well. We're all friends, we all get along, and the good news is that no matter where you live in King or Pierce County or in other parts of Washington, you're eligible for a library card at almost any other library system. So even if you live in Pierce County, stop by the Auburn Library or another branch of KCLS. We're happy to sign you up for a library card, and you'll have full access to our resources as well. So I'm here to talk mostly about resources that you can get to without walking into your public library. We'd love to have you, of course. Please stop by and say hi. But your time is valuable, and oftentimes for entrepreneurs, the real work that you do to get your business off the ground is done at home after hours, maybe after the kids have gone to bed. And being able to get to the research information that you need from your couch is very important. So I'm going to talk about information resources that you can get to from home that are provided through your public library. We call them databases. Now, the term database is tossed around a lot. By database, what I'm talking about is an online store of reliable information. It differs from the information that you might get from Google. And don't get me wrong, I love Google. I use it all the time. Everything in our databases, however, is accurate. And you can't say that about the internet. Everything in our databases is verifiable. What do I mean by that? I mean that it's not only right, but we can provide the source to prove it. And you can't always find that on the internet either. And it's going to be there when you get back. I was looking for some information actually on the internet the other day, and I know I had searched for this before, and I know I had gotten some research back, but I couldn't find it again. But for library databases, it's always going to be there when you come back to us. So to get to our databases, you can go online, and I've got a business research handout. It's on the back table if you don't have it. It's got lots of links, lots of direct lists, and some information as well about specific databases that I'm going to talk about. So make sure you grab that before you go. The databases are accessible through our website at kcls.org. That's King County Library System. And what can our databases do for you? Well, our databases can help you discover some of the following information. Who your competitors are. When you're starting out, you do need to know the landscape of who you're competing against. What are the core issues and trends of your industry? What are those factors happening locally as well as globally that are going to affect how you do your business? What are your target market? What do those demographics look like? Who are they? Where are they? How are you going to market to them instead of marketing to everybody and hoping that that piece of it is hearing you? And then some financial ratios. The financial ratios I throw in as a bonus here. Some people find that incredibly confusing. Some people find them very helpful, especially for those financial projections that you're going to be putting into your business plan. So let's talk about specific, let's talk about getting started. The first thing I recommend before you start doing research for your business is figure out what your NAICS code is. What am I talking about? NAICS is, it stands for North American Industrial Classification System. That sounds like a very librarian thing to say, doesn't it? It's a way that we organize similar businesses together. And we do that by applying a number to them. In the library, we call the Dewey Decimal Number. In the business world, it's a NAICS code. There's an older version of this called the SIC, or Standard Industrial Classification, or SIC code. You might see both. They're not quite interchangeable, but for the purposes of this talk, they will be. Let's stick with NAICS, so it's the newer, updated one. You can figure out what your NAICS code is, what that number is that applies to breweries, for example, or the manufacturing industry, by going online, or you can call this 1-800 number, and you talk to a live person on the other end, and they'll ask you a few questions, and then they'll tell you what your number is. After you get your NAICS number, then go back to the library webpage, click on the Learning and Research tab, and then on Premium Databases, and you'll have a nice list of databases. We're going to start out talking about company research. This is how to find out information about another company. Now, why would you need information about another company? That's your competitors, perhaps. Or it's a supplier, perhaps. It's an intermediary. It's another business that's going to somehow affect the viability of your own business. It's very rare that a business exists in a vacuum and doesn't depend on another business for something. If you're a coffee shop, you're going to need those little cups to put your coffee in. You're going to need the coffee itself. You're going to need a lot of other pieces, for example. Reference USA is a really cool kind of basic database. It kind of works like a phone book in that it has names, addresses, and phone numbers. There's a business side, the white pages, and there's a residential side as well. And yes, I could find out your address if I looked you up in Reference USA. For the business piece, down at the bottom of the slide, you'll see available databases. There's a specific one just for business. If you click on that and enter in your NAICS code, and then enter in your zip code, for example, you can see every other business in your industry category that's doing business in a specific zip code. So those would be, in a geographic area, your competitors. You can run the same search nationwide and see all of your competitors nationwide, because in certain industries, it doesn't matter where you are located geographically. It just matters what business industry you're working in. So how can that be helpful? Well, if you pull up information about a specific company in Reference USA, you get a little additional information. You get their CEO information, contact, number of employees. You also get some interesting financial information about that company. Now, I'm going to add a caveat here, that you're not going to get the exact number of their annual sales for the most part, because for the most part, the companies in Reference USA are private companies. Private companies don't have to tell you what their annual sales are or anything else. What Reference USA does is it takes information from a number of resources and analyzes it and strips out defining information and then gives you kind of a range of numbers, which can be very helpful if you're starting out, for example, as a brewery. You might want to look at other breweries in this geographic area, and then using Reference USA, you can see what they're spending, for example, a range of their total sales that they're spending on advertising or that they're spending on inventory. And a lot of people starting out find that really helpful just to kind of wrap their heads around it. Moving on, industry research is the next step. This is what's going on in the larger industry. What are those trends? Who are the big players? What's coming down the pike? There's a couple of databases that I recommend for that kind of information. First Research is a new database we have from Mergent, and I've got a little bookmark on the back table for that one. This is a way to see not only kind of newspapery articles about a specific industry, but you get an overview of all of those major players. You can get more in-depth information about those companies. You get some market research information, the charts and graphs. By the way, charts and graphs are a great visual piece to add to your business plan, so keep that in mind. Business Insights is another great one. Same idea. It's just information that a different company is putting out there. Let me back up a second and say that these databases that I'm talking about are very expensive, and I don't say that lightly. They really are very expensive, and the information within is very valuable. The fact that you get it for free from us doesn't mean that it isn't worth anything. It means that we've spent the money and we're offering it back to the public as a community benefit. I see lots of nods at the table here. Thank you, guys. The fact that you can get to it through the library means that we're working on your behalf. Also, a lot of this information isn't available through Google or any other means. So even if you did the right search and spent the time looking through all the resources that Google sent back to you, you probably wouldn't find the same information or the same quality information. So take that to heart. Taking a step further, business news. A lot of the research that you'll find in a database like ABI Inform is coming from major newspapers or business publications, trade journals. There's wire news in there as well. It's a great resource, ABI Inform, for kind of doing a one-stop shopping for the news. So it's going to include some of the more popular titles that you might be aware of, like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. You'll also see glossy weeklies like Newsweek and Time. But you'll also see those key trade journals for your particular industry. And that's really where some valuable information is. Some really ahead of the curve insights on what's happening in an industry, and some great charts and graphs as well that you could leverage. So yeah, check that one out. I know it's got a terrible name, maybe I Inform Trade and Industry, but basically it's a compendium of newspaper and magazine articles from all kinds of business publications around the world. We also have access to a Puget Sound Business Journal free at the library. If you have ever read Puget Sound Business Journal, you know it's a very reputable local source for business news. It's also very expensive. So if you want to pay for it, that's great. I'd question your entrepreneurial skills if you're going to pay for something you can get for free, though. Oh, you know what? This slide is actually old. Apologies, Tiffany, I must have sent the wrong one. Target market and demographics is another category that the library can provide help with. This is an old tool that we had called SimplyMap, and we got rid of it because it wasn't simple. And it's true. It was very powerful, but it's difficult to use. We have a new one, and it's so new I've forgotten the name of it because I was going to rely on the slide. It's so new that we just got it in starting January 1st, actually. It's called, it'll come to me in a second, or I'll look it up. Anyway, we have great tools for looking locally at demographic information. So finding in a visual way using a map or just creating a report, you can see key census-based information, like how many single people of color live in a certain zip code between the ages of 50 and 64. And yeah, you can dial down that granularly. You can get information about other household information that the census generally collects. And it goes beyond that into the realm of market research. So there's information in some of the databases at the library about, for example, how many people within a certain geographic area are interested in a specific category of beer, or how many of them are interested, how many of them play basketball on the weekends? How many of them like to garden? If that kind of information, if you can think of a category that applies to your specific business, and you've wondered how many people in this area do that, what's my market in this area? We have the tools that can help you connect to that information more quickly and in a way that you can verify better than any others, I promise.
Stephen, was it Social Explorer?
Thank you, Kirk. You're a genius. Thank you. Social Explorer is our new database, and it's a lot easier and more powerful than this old one on the screen. Let me move on to one more. I mentioned Reference USA in the beginning. I'm going to come back to it as we talk about target market and demographics because as I'm up here talking, I'm telling you all the great things that we can do, but I want to give you a specific example of how the library has a tool that can help you. I call this guerrilla marketing. So I mentioned Reference USA has access to business information. It also has access to consumer information. So I could, again, look one of you up and tell you your street address and your phone number. I could also tell you a little bit more information about you that would probably scare you. A portion of Reference USA is called Lifestyles and Consumer Information. And this is where the Reference USA folks have taken stores of information that they bought from marketers, magazine subscriptions, for example, or other sources of information that are specific to individuals in the community. And they made it available, again, in this kind of broad way, but that's still a little bit scary. So I'm going to talk about those categories that I mentioned as well with Social Explorer, like what do you spend money on? What are your broad interests? Is it gardening? Is it horses? Is it do you like gourmet food? And for the guerrilla marketing piece, you could run a report for all of the folks that like gourmet chocolate in a 30-mile radius, in 6 zip codes in South King County, you can parse the information geographically however you want. And then that'll spit out the names and addresses of those people. And then you can dump those into a spreadsheet. If you know how to do a mail merge, you can print out mailing labels. And it's really easy to do a little postcard campaign to get the word out about your small business that you're just starting up. So guerrilla marketing, there it is. I don't think I have any more slides. No, I don't. I'm going to open it up for questions, though. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah. Wait for the mic.
The databases that you talked about, do you have to go to the library to use them, or can you sign into your library account at your computer?
Exactly. The only thing you need to do to access these is have a library card. And that stands for all of the ones I mentioned. We do have a couple of databases, Ancestry.com pops to mind, where we allow free access, but you actually have to be in the building. That's a small minority of our databases. So for the most part, you can get to them anywhere and at any time. Okay. Other questions? Yeah.
Is the NAICS number the same as like a NAFTA number for like UPS?
I don't know, but I don't think so. Do you guys have any? No, I don't. I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards and we can drill down and find the right answer, but I don't think it's exactly the same. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Hi.
Can you use the NAICS number that identifies what your service is or what you are, but can you obtain other numbers that would then service you? So if I'm a facility and I want to find out about linen providers in the area.
That's a great example. Absolutely,
Okay.
yes, you could do that. You can do that at the census website, but they don't have a good search box for entering the a keyword on an industry. Actually, you can do it easiest in like Reference USA or another one of the databases that I showed you. Usually, there's a quick NAICS lookup tool. So yeah, great example. Use a NAICS code to find linen providers in this area. Yeah. Any other questions? Thoughts? Let me leave you with a couple more thoughts. The library offers, again, assistance, not only books, but assistance with information as well. We provide one-on-one service, so if you'd like to come in and make an appointment, we'll be happy to sit down with you and work with you on your specific information need, or refer you to an agency that might better be able to help you. I'm not going to try to take Kirk's place, for example, but I would send people, yeah, we send people back and forth quite a bit. Beyond that, on the handout, there's a phone number. If you have a question and you need to call your local library, you're welcome to. You can always call us at the Auburn Library. You can also go to any other library, or you can call the 1-800 number on the back of this and get answered any of your questions. Thanks for your time. Yeah, Kirk.
I just have you mention,
Please.
There's a small business website that you worked on. Is
Yeah.
that still available?
It's not quite. It's available in a slightly different format.
Oh, I see.
But it is on, if you go to the website again at kcls.org, you can go to information about, it's called Learning and Research. And under the Learning and Research tab, there's a small business page that has a lot of more information as well as links to some of these databases, some agencies like Kirk's and other places that can help you.
Yeah, I thought it was really great.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. Done?
Thank you, Stephen. At this time, are there any questions for any of the speakers that maybe you thought of after they left the podium? If not, on one of the handouts that you did get, the agenda page, there is bios and all the complete contact information on it for all the speakers. And if anybody watching the video, you have a question as far as how to contact somebody, you can always get a hold of us at our office here at City Hall. On the screen right now is just a list of our upcoming 2016 Business Development Workshop Series. Next month on February 16th, we're going to be exploring in a lot more depth on the development of your business plan. We'll get into accounting, a little bit deeper on a number of other subjects. So you might enjoy that as far as once you start to go down the trail of getting your outline built. We'll help you start to fill in the blanks with some of your questions at that time. And then in April, we're going to do marketing and promotions. We'll get into website development, Facebook, Twitter, multimedia, social media type of how to market your company. At this time, I'd like to also thank Mayor Nancy Backus and the Auburn City Council for the continued support and funding for this type of small business development workshop series. And then also I'd like to thank our two partners, the Auburn Area Chamber of Commerce and the Auburn Downtown Association, for helping to promote this series, and you also get the video links out to their membership. And again, you can always get those at auburnwa.gov under economic development. There's dozens of videos there that you can always go back, and this one will be up in about a week. At this time, I'd like to thank all of our speakers, and thank you very much, and hope to see you next month.